Now let's have a look at an example. The first thing we'll do is we'll create the storage virtual machine. Then we create a live, create policies and rules, and of course we need a data volume to be accessible from a client. Now let's first check the licenses, and as we can see, node 2 is licensed for NFS and node 1 is also licensed for NFS, so we're all set. First we create the storage virtual machine, we call it dNFS, and the root volume is called RV. The next thing we do is we'll set up an IP address, so we create a logical interface. And the data protocol for the logical interface obviously has to be at least NFS, otherwise it won't be accessible. And the IP address is 222 at the end, so that will be the address that we're going to access from the client. The next thing we do is we'll create policies, and as we discussed, these policies are empty when you create them. So first we create the root policy, and the second one is going to be the data policy. Then we add a rule to the root policy, and this means that any client is able to access, but we're going to block writing to that particular root volume, because we will connect the root policy to the root volume obviously later. The second rule that we add is for the data policy, and one specific client is able to read, write, and also he will be treated as root if he accesses the volume as root. Then we'll create a second rule for this particular policy for the rest of all of the clients, and they will only be allowed to read. So we've got one client that's allowed to write. And then we create the volume, specify the junction path /NFS. We don't specify size. Obviously you specify size. I don't do that now because it's just an example. The root volume will use the root policy. Something we should not forget is enable NFS in the storage virtual machine, otherwise you won't be able to access it from the client. So we turn on NFS, and as you can see, version 3 is enabled by default. Now we log into Linux, and I'm on Linux 2 here, and what we'll do is we'll create a mount point, or in fact we create two mount points, one for the data volume and one for the root volume. But first let's do the data volume. So we check whether we've got NFS installed on the client, which is correct. Then we run a show mount, which will tell us which volumes are exported, and in our case that's IP address 222 at the end. And you see NFS1 is exported, as is the root volume. So first we'll mount NFS1, and let's see if we can write a file to that particular file system. We create a file, and obviously we succeed because we're allowed to write. Then we will create another directory, which is the root volume mount point, and we'll mount that particular root volume to that new mount point. We access it and try to create a file, but we fail because it's read-only. Finally, we do an unmount of all that stuff, and we're done.